It really gets you thinking, doesn't it? This whole business of being human. Why our minds work the way they do, the hidden things driving our actions. It's just endlessly fascinating to me.
It is, yeah.
Mm.
And that curiosity, that sort of fundamental urge to understand ourselves and other people too, that's where you find some really interesting stuff.
Well, today we're diving right into some of that interesting stuff. We looked at a YouTube video from the Brainy channel. It's called 11 Interesting Psychological Facts About Human Behavior.
Right.
And our mission, basically, is to pull out the really key insights for you, our listeners, just to get a better handle on how complex we all are.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Okay, let's kick off with something we all deal with, memory. The first point is about this thing called the reminiscence bump. What's the main idea there?
Okay, the reminiscence bump. It's this interesting pattern where people tend to remember things much more clearly from their teenage years and their early 20s.
Right. So adolescence and early adulthood.
Exactly. Compared to other times in their lives, those years just seem stickier, more vivid.
Yeah, the video mentioned older adults often talk about that time and how those coming-of-age stories just, resonate with everyone. Why? Why are those memories so strong?
Well, it looks like there are a couple of big reasons. First off, that time of life is just packed with emotion, right?
Definitely. Lots of firsts.
Yeah, tons of firsts, big changes. Graduating, first relationships, maybe starting a career, leaving home. All that stuff is new, often intense emotionally. And strong emotions tend to make memories stick much better. They get encoded more deeply.
That makes sense. High stakes, big feelings. Those moments leave a mark.
Exactly. And the second thing is these memories are really tangled up with figuring out who you are, your identity.
Okay.
It's during that period that a lot of our core beliefs, our values, our goals in life, they start to really solidify. So the things that happen then, they kind of become the building blocks of our life story, who we see ourselves as. That makes them easier to access later when we're reflecting.
So it's not just looking back. These memories actually help define who we are now. It makes you think about your own early 20s, doesn't it? What really stands out?
Yeah, it really does. It shows how much that period shapes the narrative we tell ourselves about our lives.
Okay, let's switch gears. How we solve problems. The next fact introduces Solomon's paradox. That sounds intriguing.
It does, yeah. Solomon's paradox, it basically points out that we're often much wiser, more rational when we think about other people's problems compared to our own.
Oh, tell me about it. I feel like I've definitely given brilliant advice to friends.
Right.
While completely messing up my own very similar situation. Why do we do that? What causes that gap?
Well, a big piece of it seems to be emotional distance. When it's someone else's problem, we're not as caught up in the feelings of it all. So we can be more detached, more analytical. But with our own problems, well, they trigger strong emotions, anxieties, biases we already have. And that can really cloud our judgment, make us less rational.
So how do we get that wise advisor perspective for ourselves when we're stuck in our own mess?
The video mentioned a technique called self-distancing. The idea is you consciously try to step back.
Okay.
Look at your situation as if you were advising someone else, like a friend. That little mental shift can help lower the emotional heat, let you think more clearly. Have you ever tried that sort of thing?
I think I've tried picturing what I'd tell a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds similar. It does create a bit more space in your head. Okay, fact 3, totally different direction. The Dunning-Kruger effect. I think we've all seen this one in action, even if we didn't know the name.
Oh, absolutely. The Dunning-Kruger effect. It's a cognitive bias where people who aren't very competent at something, well, they tend to seriously overestimate how good they actually are. They basically don't have the self-awareness to see their own lack of skill.
The video had that great example, didn't it? Yeah. Someone at a party confidently talking nonsense about a topic. Totally wrong, but completely oblivious. We can all picture that person. So what's behind that lack of awareness?
It seems like the very skills you need to be good at something are also the skills you need to recognize competence in yourself and others.
Oh, I see.
So if someone lacks those basic abilities, they also can't accurately judge their own performance. They don't know enough to realize they don't know much.
So what does that tell us about maybe needing feedback from other people?
It really highlights that, doesn't it? Our own self-assessment isn't always reliable. Getting outside perspectives is pretty crucial if you want to improve.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift again. The next point looks at personality and pet choice, specifically dogs that sometimes get labeled as aggressive. This raises some interesting questions.
It does. There's research suggesting a bit of a correlation between people who score higher on hostility measures and owning dog breeds with a reputation for aggression. So it makes you wonder, right? Do we pick pets that kind of reflect something about ourselves? Or maybe fill some need we have?
It's kind of like asking if our pets are an extension of us, like how we might choose friends or partners who are similar to us.
That's one way to look at it, yeah. Maybe we're drawn to animals with certain traits, subconsciously.
Like energy levels or maybe wanting a protective dog.
Could be. But it's really important, as the video points out, not to jump to conclusions. There are other factors, too.
Definitely. Things like maybe someone feels isolated or lives in a high-crime area or just doesn't have many visitors.
Right.
That could lead them to want a guard dog for practical reasons, not just personality. We shouldn't judge the dog or the owner too quickly.
Exactly. It's likely a mix of things. Personality, circumstances. It's complex.
Agreed. Exploring links, not making assumptions. Okay, now for something that might make some of us feel better, the potential upside of daydreaming. I know I've been told to stop zoning out plenty of times.
Yeah, the usual view is that mind wandering is bad, right? Unproductive. But this fact flips that idea. It suggests daydreaming might actually be linked to being more intelligent and creative.
Okay, I like the sound of that. I've definitely had ideas pop into my head when I was supposed to be doing something else entirely. What's the connection there?
Well, some studies have found this correlation. People who score higher on intelligence and creativity tests also report daydreaming more often.
Interesting.
So maybe it's not a sign of a switched-off brain, but actually a very active one.
Active how? The video mentioned something about brain efficiency.
Yeah, the theory is that people with, let's say, more efficient brains might have extra mental bandwidth even when they're doing simple tasks.
Oh, okay.
So their minds can wander off, explore ideas, make connections without completely losing track of the main task if they need to snap back. It's like multitasking mentally.
So that zoning out could actually be like subconscious brainstorming. That's a cool way to think about it. Oh. Okay, next up. Something pretty universal, the pain of rejection, how intense it can feel.
Yeah, it's something everyone experiences, and the neuroscience behind it is quite revealing. The video highlights how our brains process social rejection very similarly to physical pain.
Wow. Really, we use phrases like a breaking heart or gut punch, but you're saying there's a real brain basis for that.
It seems so. Brain scans show that the same areas, the same neural networks that light up when you, say, stub your toe, also become active when you experience social exclusion or rejection, even small stuff.
That explains why even a little snub can hurt so much then.
Exactly. What does that suggest about how fundamental our need for connection is?
It really underlines it, doesn't it? That our brains treat threats to our social bonds almost like physical threats.
Wow. Okay, let's move to something really interesting. How speaking a foreign language might affect decision-making.
Yeah, this one's a bit counterintuitive, but super interesting. The research suggests that using a language that isn't your native tongue can actually help reduce certain biases in how you make decisions. Really, I would guess the opposite. Like, the extra effort might make you more prone to mistakes or just going with your gut.
That's what you might think, but the idea is that using a foreign language forces you into a more deliberate analytical mode of thinking.
How so?
Well, in your native language, a lot of responses and feelings are automatic, almost intuitive. And sometimes those intuitions are where biases creep in.
Okay.
But with a foreign language, you have to consciously think more. It creates a kind of cognitive distance.
Did the act of translating and thinking in a different system, kind of,
Right.
engages the more rational part of the brain?
That's the idea. Some studies suggest that when you inhibit your native language and its sort of emotional connections, that process might also help inhibit those impulsive emotional reactions that lead to biased choices. The foreign language acts like a bit of a buffer.
That is fascinating. Makes you think about international diplomacy, business deals. Anywhere, clear thinking is crucial. All right, next, a really common one. I think we all do this. The fundamental attribution error.
Ah, yes, the fundamental attribution error. It's basically our tendency to explain other people's bad behavior by blaming their personality or character while blaming our own similar mistakes on the situation. It's a kind of double standard.
Oh, the driving example in the video was perfect.
Yeah.
Someone cuts you off, you think, what a jerk.
Right.
Then 5 minutes later, you cut someone off because you're late.
Yeah.
And you think, well, I was in a hurry. It's so true. Why do we do that?
It probably comes down to perspective and what information we have access to. When we see someone else act, their action is the main thing we notice.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going on in their head or what pressures they're under, so we default to, oh, that's just the kind of person they are.
But for ourselves.
But for ourselves, we know the whole context. We know we were late or stressed or whatever the situation was that made us act that way.
So we give ourselves a pass, basically, but not others. It's a good reminder to try and see the situation from their side sometimes. Okay, next is the third-person effect. Sounds a bit sci-fi.
It does have that ring to it, but it's a really common thing related to media influence. The third-person effect is basically the belief that persuasive messages like ads or political messages affect other people much more than they affect us.
Oh, yeah, I can totally see that. People always say, oh, advertising doesn't work on me, but they assume it works on everyone else. Why do we think we're immune?
Well, it could be partly that self-serving bias. Again, we like to think of ourselves as smart and independent.
Right. Not easily swayed.
Exactly. Plus, we might just not be aware of the subtle, gradual ways media does influence us, our moods, what we desire, our attitudes. It happens even if we don't consciously clock it.
And the video said it's even stronger for stuff we don't like.
Yeah, that's interesting too. We're even more convinced we're not affected by ads or messages for things we disapprove of. But the point is, we probably are influenced more than we think. A bit of humility needed there.
Definitely.
Okay.
Nearly there. Fact 10.
Yeah.
The dopamine-driven search for information. This feels very relevant today.
Absolutely. This touches on the dopamine reward system in our brains and how it hooks into consuming information. Social media scrolling is the classic example.
Oh, the endless scroll. We've all been there, lost in that information vortex. What's dopamine got to do with it?
So dopamine is often called the pleasure chemical, but it's more about motivation and seeking rewards. It gets released not just when we get something nice, but also in anticipation of it.
Oh.
And novelty, new information, is one of those things our brain find rewarding. So every new notification, every new post you scroll to, your brain gets a little dopamine hit, anticipating something interesting. And that little hit reinforces the scrolling behavior, makes you want to keep going.
So that constant trickle of new stuff keeps the dopamine loop going and makes it hard to stop.
That's exactly it. The video rightly calls it potentially addictive. You're always chasing the next little dopamine reward from the next piece of info, but it's never quite fully satisfying, so you keep scrolling until something pulls you away. It's a powerful brain mechanism.
It really makes you think about how much time we spend just consuming passively and what's driving it. Okay, finally, the last fact ends on a positive note. The benefits of helping others.
Yes, and it's a great reminder about how connected our well-being is. The video talks about all the advantages for the giver, too, not just the receiver, when we do things like volunteering, donating, or just helping someone out.
So beyond just doing a good thing, what are the benefits for the person doing the helping?
Well, the list was pretty long. Things like feeling happier, better overall well-being, managing stress better, maybe even boosting your immune system.
Wow.
A bigger sense of purpose in life, feeling less lonely, having stronger social ties. And maybe the most striking thing, it mentioned research suggesting people who volunteer regularly actually tend to live longer.
That is quite a list. A really strong case for kindness and generosity. It's a great way to round off all these different aspects of how we tick. The video did have an important reminder at the end, though.
It did, yeah. It's crucial to remember these are psychological facts, often based on studies with specific groups. They show general tendencies, but they aren't hard and fast rules for every single person.
Right. They're starting points for thinking, not the final word.
Exactly. Think of them as insights, prompts for more curiosity, rather than definitive answers about everyone.
So today we've covered a lot of ground. Memory, problem solving, biases, how our minds wander, rejection, language, judgment, media influence, dopamine, helping others.
Yeah.
And quite the journey through our psychology.
We have. And, reflecting on all this, it kind of leads to a final thought maybe for our listeners to consider. Thinking about all these insights, what's one part of your own behavior or your own way of thinking that you might be curious to watch or understand a bit better now? How might some of these psychological forces be playing out in your own life, maybe in ways you hadn't really noticed before?
That's a great question to leave people with. It's not about having it all figured out, is it? It's about staying curious and realizing just how complex and, frankly, amazing it is to be human. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.